Om Sri Gurubhyo Namaha. Namaste, Dr. Nilesh, and to all the friends and Yoga Brotherhood who have joined us live on the Rishivatika YouTube channel. I am Venkat Raghavan, Director, International Institute of Vedic Sciences, and the host for this session. Let us start with a prayer. Gurur Brahma, Gurur Vishnu, Guru Devo Maheshwaraha, Guru Sakshat Parabrahma, Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Welcome to Dr. Vedavyasa Memorial Online Lecture Series being conducted by International Institute of Vedic Sciences, Rishivatika, and promoted by Vedavyasa Bharati Trust, USCEFI, and Yoga Brotherhood of America, with the blessings of our Pujya Guruji, Dr. Vedavyasa. Today is the 41st talk in the online lecture series by Dr. Nilesh Oak on the topic Agastya as a Pathfinder and Antiquity of Indian Civilization. I am personally very keen to listen and learn from Dr. Nilesh on Agastya Maharshi, star Canopus, as we all know, in the southern hemisphere in the sky. But before we start the session, with your kind permission, I would like to introduce the book of our Puja Guruji, Dr. Vedavyas, titled Astronomical Dating of Mahabharata War, a USCEFI publication in the year 1986. Dr. Vedavyas comes from a family of traditional Vedic scholars from 7 generations and is an author of 100 plus books in English and Telugu languages. This book, Astronomical Dating of Mahabharata War, is the thesis submitted for his doctorate in Sanskrit PhD from Andhra University. A significant contribution to investigate into the exact date when the Great Mahabharata War began, using the latest scientific techniques including radiocarbon dating, astronomical dating, etc. The book unravels the mystic passages in the Sanskrit epic of Mahabharata and arrives at the exact dating when the war has commenced. It also contains a valuable review of all the research material so far on the subject, along with the history of the tradition of the Hindu Panchanga, as we know as calendar, from the Vedic age till Aryabhatta. It also includes a survey of Puranic chronology of the kings of Kali Yuga, the cycle of Saptarishis, and also a scientific survey of geology, zoology, paleontology, climatology, etc., about the gigantic shift in the Earth's axis and the rise of Himalayas and even the global cataclysm which altered the calendars of the world from Egypt to India. This book is a multidisciplinary research on the date of Kali Yuga, beginning which shakes up the existing chronology of India. It also contains a rare copper plate grant of King Janmejaya, the grandson of Yudhishthira, at the time of Sarpayaga, the snake sacrifice. A masterly research that makes chronology a science and not a literary surmise. With this introduction, I would now like to introduce our guest speaker of the day. It is a privilege and honor to introduce Dr. Nilesh Oak, who is an author, researcher, speaker, and a corporate consultant. He holds master's degree in chemical engineering and an executive MBA. He published 3 books with titles When Did the Mahabharata War Happen?, The Mystery of Arundhati, The Historic Rama, and Bhishma Nirvana. These books are available on Amazon. He also writes extensively on ancient Indian history. Dr. Nilesh helps Indians become aware of the deep antiquity of Indian civilization so that they truly comprehend, present, or defend the grand narrative of India, unlike most other Indic researchers, because he builds it through scientific acumen and logical reasoning. He is adjunct faculty at the Institute of Advanced Sciences, Dartmouth, Massachusetts, USA. With this introduction, I would request Dr. Nilesh to deliver his talk. Nilesh, please.
Thank you, Raghavan Garu, for that wonderful introduction. Thank you to all the organizers and inviting me for this lecture series. And also thanks to and welcome and greetings to everyone who would be watching through various platforms such as Facebook and YouTube. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump into my PowerPoint presentation. Sometime through the pictures, it's a lot easy to convey what I want to convey about the Agastya. Agastya as a pathfinder. Pathfinder in the sense of a physical path, pathfinder in the sense of a terrestrial path, but also in the sense of a celestial path, and also a pathfinder for the civilization, for Indian civilization, but in some sense, therefore, for a global civilization. And we'll see the role of Agastya. Agastya as a Rishi, as an individual, a series of Rishis, as a matter of fact, because all the descendants of Agastya are also Agastya. And then also Agastya as a star, as somebody mentioned, I think Raghavanji mentioned, as a canopus, as a star, and its role as a pathfinder for our civilization. And when I say our civilization there, I don't mean just Indian civilization, although Agastya is known as Agastya for canopus only in Indian civilization. All right. So with that, let me get into my PowerPoint presentation. All right, so Agastya the Pathfinder and how that is used in understanding, in comprehending, and contextualizing the antiquity of Indian civilization. Okay, all right. So Agastya, I mean, where does it appear in India's ancient narratives? Agastya is omnipresent and omnipotent. Okay, it's there everywhere, and soon we will see he's there on the ground as a sage Agastya, and through his descendants, many sage Agastyas. And also he's up there in the celestial world. But as far as even the ancient Indian narratives, and that's the word I use, and by that I'll show you what I mean by that. It's a generic word I try my best to avoid. That doesn't mean always I'm successful. In using certain words, such as say scripture, which has a somewhat different connotation than what is what how Indian civilization looks at, say, Vedas or epics or Upanishads. So I try to avoid it, but that's not to say anything wrong if somebody uses that word. So if we want to find out where does Agastya appear in ancient Indian narratives, the answer is everywhere. In fact, where does he not appear? So let's start with the Vedas. Okay, he is there in Rigveda, right from his birth, story of his birth to you see the samvad between Agastya and his wonderful wife Lopamudra. Okay, again, Lopamudra also has a terrestrial presence and celestial presence, but we will not talk about that today. He is not only in Rigveda, he is in the all Vedas. If you go to Brahmanas, so Rigveda, which is Veda Samvita, and then when they are used in the context of many other things, such as say Yajna, for example, or many other aspects, then the Brahmanas come into the picture. Okay, it's a Brahmana Grantha that I'm referring to. He shows up everywhere in the Brahmana Grantha. He is there in the epics. He is there in the Mahabharata. It's well, I'll talk about how does he appear when I complete this whole list. So he's there in the Mahabharata many times. Okay, right from Adi Parva all the way to the ending Parvas, like say Ashram Vasik Parva or Ashwamedha Parva, and obviously through Shanti Parva and Anushasan Parva. He's there everywhere. And even the two warriors fighting, they will casually refer to some reference of Agastya while fighting. Okay, or if they are discussing some other subject, suddenly Agastya story or a reference to Agastya would emerge. He's also there in Ramayana. Okay, he's also there in Puranas, also there in Upanishads. Then Tantra literature. By Tantra, I mean, again, it has a vast scope. Here specifically, I have in mind the astronomy Tantra, such as say Parashar Tantra, for example. He's also there in Siddhanta, like say Surya Siddhanta. So he's omnipresent. Okay. Now, in most of these cases, or almost all of these cases, he appears suddenly out of nowhere. Like two individuals may be discussing these things. It may be a discussion between Vishwamitra and Ram and Lakshman. It may be a discussion between Yudhishthir and sage Lomash. And suddenly in the middle of the discussion, a story of Agastya would occur. Okay, a reference to Agastya would be made. And the reference is made in such a fashion that it always tells us that whoever he is, whoever this person individual is, whoever this entity, let's call it for a minute, Agastya is, it's very ancient, very old. But how old is that? Okay, that's something I want to focus on a little bit and in certain context. Let's begin with the birth of Agastya. Now, Rigveda has many layers. Rigveda has 10 mandalas. Then each mandala has many suktas. Each suktas has got ruk or rucha. And they are not always connected. One sukta is not always connected to another sukta. I mean, there is some method to madness, but when we try to understand, we are not always clear. And therefore, there are many different interpretations of Rigveda that you see, depending on the purpose. And that's what I mean by it has multiple layers. But I want to just give you a brief reference to it. There are many other references, but specifically, I'm showing one from the 7th mandala of Rigveda. Okay, again, many verses. I just quoted few, but want to show number 10. And that's where Agastya is referred to in the context of Mitra Varuna. Okay, that's how his birth is described. And his birth is along with the Vasishta. Okay, so Vasishta and Agastya, that pair can also be seen into Vedic literature everywhere. Okay, and another name for was Agastya. There are many different names for Agastya, but one of the important one, and that's relevant, is man. And the man in the sense of a measurement. Okay, now we use that word in some sense in the anuman, so that's also in the sense of measurement, like it's something is measured to arrive at something, hawaman, like a weather and stuff like that. So that man in the sense of a measurement is the word that is assigned to him. So he's described in some places as a dwarf individual, and his height was itself a measurement of used as a measurement unit, and in that sense also man. Okay, now I don't want to go into the details of these descriptions, but I specifically quoted something from the 7th mandala of Rigveda, and it is for a reason. Because those of you who are listening, if you are aware of research of many individuals over last hundreds of years who have tried to study Rigveda, and again you can get extreme positions from one end to the other, such as all Rigveda, it's not composed, to other extreme that it cannot be dated. There should not be even an attempt to date Rigveda, to the extent that all the Rigveda is all composed at one time, versus Rigveda aspects was composed at multiple times and it was edited, recasted by Vyasa. My point is there will be multiple viewpoints, but here I'm going to take a specific viewpoint that I am convinced about, not convinced on just simply subjective conviction, not convinced on just a leap of faith, but based on my 25-30 years of research. Number of you might have heard the name Shrikant Talagiri, and he has done some wonderful research on Rigveda, especially Rigveda mandalas and then the relative chronology. He has also made some assertions about the absolute chronology, which I completely disagree. But on the relative chronology, what he has done, I find it amazing work. And based on that, and you can see that same work with, say, David Frawley's work on Vedas and so on. Okay, directionally they are correct, but I think Shrikant Talagiri is the best among that lot. Okay, and again, what he has done is open to criticism. So that's not like a final last word on anything. The point of quoting something from Mandala 7 is that this is one of the oldest mandala of Rigveda. So sequence goes something like this: 6, 3, 7, 4, 2. You can consider those as old part of mandala, old Rigveda. And then after that, it's like 5, 8, 1, 9. And after a long break, then you have mandala 10, more like a concluding mandala, if you want to call it. That is not to say that there are no old suktas into the newest mandalas and new sukta into the oldest mandalas, because the Rigveda has multiple purposes and it may be done for different reasons. But predominantly we can say that. Now, why am I saying this? Because Agastya is very, very old. Okay, whatever it is that we are trying to figure it out, it's very old, and that's why it becomes a pathfinder. The Rigveda uses the word Gatu Vita. Okay, so that's like a path, pathfinder, like a coach, mentor. And in many ways, the Agastya references, Agastya story, the acts of Agastya, they all become a pathfinder. Now, what I'm not going to do today is not spend time on the aspects of Agastya that are familiar to people. Agastya as a grammarian, Agastya as a civilizer, Agastya as the originator or someone who improvised into grammar, medicine, music, okay, Siddha medicine. I'm not going to go into that. I'm going to talk about few aspects in a limited time I have, specifically related to Antiquity of Indian Civilization, but also to describe how we have to step by step solve this puzzle. Okay, so now I showed you the reference from Rigveda, and I said it is the oldest portion of Rigveda. But how old is Rigveda? Okay, sometimes just it's very old doesn't help. The other lazy habit that most of us have gotten into is to say anything. How old is Ayurveda? How old is Indian civilization? And we say 5,000 years. Now we have to give up that word also. Okay, so we'll talk about what it is. So this what I'm showing you right now. This is a quick pictorial summary of my 25-30 years of research. What you're seeing is the time axis. Today is where we are, 21st century. If we go back now, let's use this as a Gregorian calendar reference. Okay, the purely solar calendar, we can say. It helps as a good reference. Like as you see in our astronomy, the solar year or the path of the sun is the reference. The ecliptic is our reference point. Same thing actually becomes very useful if we use solar year as the reference point. Okay, then we can really understand the events and the chronology in a proper fashion. So if we go back 2,000 years, that's the interface of BCE to CE. Then what you see, the numbers -5, -10, and there is a K next to it. So that refers to -5,000 BCE. So 5,000 BCE, -10K is 10,000 BCE, and so on. Okay. Against this, quickly to summarize my work, what I did, and when I was doing this research, I did read a book of Dr. Vedavyasa. And where I found that book extremely useful is where he has made a wonderful review, a short review, but still a wonderful review of, I think, like close to 130 different claims. In fact, many of my presentations, you would hear the word, there are 130 plus different claims for the year of Mahabharata. And that number, in some ways, actually comes from this book of Dr. Vedavyasa. Now, what I did is, my journey started with one specific reference that is not the subject today, so I want to move fast. That took me 15 years to demystify that, and that then I said, it gave me a very nice interval to look for the year of Mahabharata war. Then I extracted all the astronomy references, more than they amounted to more than 300. In fact, there are many more. Okay, anytime somebody raises an objection, then I have to pull 4 more additional references in responding to that. So this list is growing up. Long story short, I arrived at 5561 BC as the year of Mahabharata war. In parallel, I was also working for at least since early 90s on trying to date Ramayana. So I was studying other people's work. And in 2014, finally, I published my work on Ramayana. So again, very similar method, which is for both my theory is all astronomy descriptions of the Mahabharata text or Valmiki Ramayana text are actual factual visual observations or astronomy observations of the sky of those times. By those times, I mean Mahabharata times or Ramayana times. And to my surprise, Ramayana, actually, I found many more astronomy observations than Mahabharata. I'm saying surprising because Ramayana is like 1/5 or 1/4 the size of Mahabharata. So important lesson here for me, and I'm sharing with you, not to go by the size of the book, just like don't go by the cover of the book, don't go by the size of the book. In Ramayana, I found close to 600 astronomy references. When I put them together as a jigsaw puzzle, as a like solving a Rubik's cubes or a crossword puzzle, it led me to one specific date again and again. And I will briefly share that Ramayana portion because it's relevant to Agastya. and I arrived at 12,209 BCE. Now, this is the year of Ram Ravan Yuddha. Then very recently, and when I say recently, 2016 or so, Professor Balram Singh of Institute of Advanced Sciences, he asked me if I have done any research on the Rigveda. And now I had not done anything directly on Rigveda. I had read Srikant Talagiriji's books going back to like 20 years. And I found those fascinating, but I didn't think I had any inkling there. But when he asked me, and I had done research in the context of Saraswati River, and that came very handy. And in a very short time, actually, this happened. So Rigveda, something that I had not thought of putting it on one of my many projects, it suddenly became a project. But truly, what this came out is, frankly, less than 1 month. Now, that's not to say that I started the research then. I was researching on Saraswati for 20, 30 years. But what it showed, based on the, I started with Srikant Talagiriji's relative chronology, because I was convinced of that. And when I started studying that in the context of Saraswati, what I found is that the Rigveda is definitely the last portion, synonymous, the contemporary, not synonymous, contemporary with Mahabharata times, because Vyasa edited, that makes sense. That's why we have Shantanu and Devapi into the 10th mandala of Rigveda. Of course, we have a mention of Rama, Prithu, Vena, all that in the 10th mandala also, the summary mandala, you can call it. But the oldest portion, and that includes this number 7, where I quoted Agastya from, that definitely goes back more than 24,000 years. And the reason I'm mentioning this, and I'll come back to this in a minute, is because those people who are listening to it, I'm not asking you to take on a leap of blind faith or anything, but definitely study this. And if anyone asks you, how old is a Indian civilization, you should very comfortably, confidently, in the most scientifically honest manner, whether you understand it or not, but you should be able to say with confidence that it's definitely more than 24,000 years old. Okay. And where does this evidence come from? It comes from many, many different aspects. I'll show that in a minute. But one of my friend, he's a British friend, and he is very familiar with my work. And he said, Nilesh, now you're showing this 24,000 plus years of history. You should give a context, because chronology is so useful to give a context to everything. He said, give a context of European Enlightenment. So I asked him, when is the European Enlightenment? And the number here that's the dot there. And now you start seeing what's happening. Okay, so actually the European Enlightenment, you can see it really began, it really accelerated when they came in contact with India and also other Eastern cultures like Indonesia, China, and so on. Okay, and suddenly many good products came out of it, obviously, like the modern science, the last 500 years, and the technology, the Zoom and YouTube and Facebook, so science turning to technology, a lot of great things. On the other hand, there are some absolutely dogmatic, disastrous things that also came out. One of them is Aryan invasion theory, the whole nonsense of Aryan invasion. I'll not talk about that. And something for us Indians to be aware of is the issue of a Yuga. Yuga has multiple definitions. Don't get stuck into one specific definition. Anyways, that's again not my subject today. Quickly, I want to mention that the chronology that I just described it to you, it is, I started with astronomy, then I went for Saraswati evidence. So that's how I built it. But it is now been validated and is being validated every single day through multiple different disciplines of science. Okay. Now, this is the context for our Agastya. Quickly, I don't want you to necessarily understand anything on this picture, but this is created by one of my co-researcher and original researcher in her own field, Mrs. Rupa Bhattiji. Okay, so and Agastya happens to be her key subject. Okay, so actually I'll be sharing some of the slides from her presentation. But what you're seeing here is many things are conjectural in nature. Okay, we haven't necessarily found multiple pieces of evidence, but we have found a evidence, and therefore she has created this. That is, most of it is her original research work, by the way. And we are, as of now, we can see going back to 200,000 years. Okay, obviously, a lot more research is required. And this is partly, if you can see some words, I don't want to spend much time on this, coming from Agastya. Okay, Agastya is one of the key pathfinder in helping her or helping us go back in antiquity. Okay, let's quickly get into some of the illustrations. So remember that at least 24,000 years and possibly up to 200,000 plus years as our landscape on a time. Okay, and then now we'll talk about the terrestrial landscape. Now in Ramayana, Agastya is visible only from the extreme southern tip of India. In fact, when I found the timing of Ramayana as the 12,209 BC, I thought, okay, so Agastya would not be visible. And I'll tell you why I thought that. So it is her work, and I'll briefly mention that. But quickly, how did I arrive at the Ramayana timing? The reason again I'm mentioning is because that's the connection with the Agastya. So I started with our time, 21st century. Definitely Ramayana did not happen in our time. We celebrate Rama Janma. We are building a Ram Mandir now. That is all great. But it didn't occur in our time, right? So when I went back, Ramayana mentions Saraswati, and we know that the Saraswati started drying after 4500 BC. Definitely gone was 2000 BC, so it was not there. Whereas in Ramayana times, it was flowing beautifully. Now, Ramayana times also had Yamuna meeting Ganga, and our modern research shows us that Yamuna stopped from Saraswati and started meeting Ganga only after 50,000 BCE. So that gives us the upper limit. And this is how I'm just also sharing an example how the research needs to be done. Okay, the research needs to be conducted. At least we should make a best attempt to define the upper bounds, lower bounds, find the approximately region first, and then look for the precise and accurate. Many times you will find people just quickly jump into it and try to find some piece of evidence, and they just hang on to it for the rest of their life, thinking that's what it is. Okay, so we definitely know, and again, we are open to criticism. So if we find some new evidence for Yamuna, that Yamuna was indeed meeting Ganga, say, million years ago, we will change our mind. Because whole Sanatan Vedic Dharma is Yaskacharya, the Niruktakar, talks about as Sanatano Nitya Nutana. You know, it is capable. In fact, the only Dharma, only civilization tradition which is capable of refreshing itself in the presence of new evidence. Okay, so we will do that. But based on what we know right now, it has to be before 4500 BC, 50,000, and after 50,000 BCE. Then another reference I found, and by the way, I'm just showing you as a narration, but this reference I found after I had published my book. Okay, so, and there is no conspiracy between these guys at IIT Kanpur and me. I don't know them, they don't know me. Satluj separated from Saraswati. It was coming down south, and part of Saraswati, like as a like a fan, or the Mayur, what you call the whole his tail, you know, the way he makes that fan. One side is a Saraswati, sorry, one side is a Satluj, other side is a Yamuna. But this Satluj sharply turned westward and started flowing westward and started meeting Sindhu. And our evidence, this is a paper from 2017, 2018. My book was published in 2014. It showed that the sharp turning of Satluj westward happened in 13,000 BC. Now, why is this important? See, remember, my timing is 12,000 BC. This is based on astronomy evidence. In Valmiki Ramayana, there is a description of Shatudri when Bharat is coming from Kekaya back to Ayodhya. And there the description of Shatudri or Satluj is given as that river which is flowing sharp westward. Okay, so that also gives you another limit. I'm going to go a bit fast through this. So then I got into the actual Valmiki Ramayana references. I mean, the others are also Valmiki Ramayana references, like Yamuna River and Saraswati, Satluj River and Saraswati. But now I got into the astronomy evidence. And that one particular piece of astronomy evidence gave me another bound. Okay, so 10,500 to 17,500. Another astronomy evidence gave me another bound. And you see how I'm overlapping it and getting a area that is agreeable to all of these bounds, so to say. And then one very interesting, now that brings us to Agastya. The Brahma Rashi in the North Pole Star, which is a Abhijit or Vega, is described as a pole star in the Ramayana times. Brahma Rashi Vishuddhasya, Shuddhasya Paramarshaya Archishmanta Prakashante Dhruvam Sarve Pradakshanam. Now, that is not the only reference. By the way, as I showed you, there are many references. And then when I use rest of the 300, 400 references, it allowed me to get to 12,209 BC. The point I'm mentioning is, I had thought that Agastya was not visible during Ramayana times. Okay, Agastya Rishi was there everywhere, sage was there everywhere, in Panchavati, in the south, everywhere, Agastya Rudayam Stotra, everyone knows that. But Agastya as a star was not visible, and I thought that's perfect because 12,000, Agastya has become a pole star in the south, and therefore it must not be visible. And I'll show you what Mrs. Rupa Bhattiji's work did. Okay, quickly. Coming to Ramayana again, when Sugriva makes 4 different Vanara parties and sends them in a 4 direction in search of Sita. In the south direction, the team is led by Angada, Jambavan, and Hanuman. Okay, so I'm showing you where they went, and Sugriva is describing the directions, what different areas they should search. In reality, they did not go that far. But this is the going in the south direction with India at the center, or the central India as the center. Okay, and Sugriva describes all the way from Narmada River, like the center of India, you can say, all the way to Antarctica. Okay, in the Ramayana, Sugriva calls Antarctica Yamapuri. Okay, and you can see the descriptions. I would encourage all of you to read that from Kishkinda Kand. There are some areas that he describes that we today cannot exactly pinpoint. They could be parts of Africa, they could be like Madagascar, they could be parts of Australia, they could be part of some other land masses which are no longer existing. That's all possible. Okay, but quickly I want to bring you how his description is for the south region, starting with the central India. He starts with the Narmada River. Okay, then talks about Godavari, Krishna, Venya, all those rivers, Kaveri. And quickly, I want to bring you down to the last 2 verses here on this page. There he's saying, Tasya asinam nagasya agre malayasya mahojasam. Now, this is a discussion between Sampati and Vanaras. And he says, now get to the top of a Malaya mountain, okay, there. And then you see the reference in the next verse too. And then he says, Drakshata Aditya Sankasham Agastyam Rushi Sattamam. From there, you will see Rushi Agastya. Now remember, the Rama has met sage Agastya, or the whole descendants of Agastya, many times until now. But here the reference is to the star Agastya. At the top of the mountain, when you go, you will able to see Agastya. And how's the description? Aditya Sankasham, Drakshata Aditya Sankasham, that Agastya who is as bright as the sun, okay, is here references to Canopus. And for the location, also reference to Tamraparni. Many of you would know that river, Tamraparni here, and going down into the sea, okay, very, very further south. Okay, that area. Now, many of you may be aware the parts of the border between Tamil Nadu and Kerala, the Agastya Malay biosphere. This is a perfect spot as you refer to Ramayana descriptions for bringing astronomy and geography together. I'm going to quickly read the verses. There, the Sampati is telling, or Swayamprabha, whoever, is telling them, Vanara party. He says, Tatta samudram asadya sampradharya artha nishchayam agastena antare tatra sagare viniveshita. This slide I'm sharing from Mrs. Rupa Bhatti's presentation, okay? And from there, you will go to the Mahindra mountain. From there, you will able to see Agastya. And this is a perfect place to jump or to go towards Lanka. Okay, now today Lanka is not our subject, so I want to move on. This is the area of that Mahindra mountain, Mahindra Parvata. I took pictures from Tekadi. Okay, I've been there a couple of years ago. All right. Now, this is very interesting. Remember, I said I had thought Agastya would not be visible. What Mrs. Bhatti showed is that actually it was visible. I would encourage all of you to watch her few talks. She has also very nicely connected with Nataraja and Agastya, the Apasmar. I will not go into that today either because she has already spoken about it. So here, the reference is to visibility of Agastya from the extreme southwest corner of India. And that perfectly matches with that 12,000 BC timing. Okay, because that's when Agastya had become a pole star. Okay, but is it very explicitly said it is a pole star? Well, not here. Okay, now, so I'm just going to quickly go through this, and I'm saying, well, actually the Ramayana is describing Agastya, not only Brahma Rashi, Abhijit, Vega as a pole star in the north, but it is also indirectly somewhat, but very clearly, okay, saying Agastya as a south pole star. Again, that supports the timing. But that now for our antiquity, now think of it, Agastya is helping us, okay, helping us find the path. Now, this is how the picture would have looked in 12,209 BC or the whole 13 millennium BC. What you're seeing here is the Vega, this is the point NCP, North Celestial Point, North Celestial Pole, and this is a SCP, South Celestial Pole, that central circle, center of the circle. And look where Vega is, and also look where Canopus is. Okay, they both are acting. The brightest star in the whole polar region, northern or southern, they are the brightest. The Vega in the northern region, Canopus in the southern region. Notice Sirius, okay, the Vyada has come almost on the rim. Okay, all right. Let me move further. Now, do we have beyond Ramayana any reference to Agastya becoming a pole star? We absolutely do. If you look at how to make a Bhugol, and how to put the stars and arrange the description in Surya Siddhanta, it will say, yeah, take these stars, put Abhijit on the top, put Canopus on the south side. Okay, that's these are the reference stars, and it describes that. But if you go to Surya Siddhanta, for example, there is a description. This is now Bhugoladhyay, the 12th chapter, you can say. There is a description of two pole stars. Now, again, I have given this presentation, so I'm going to go a bit fast through this. There are two pole stars that are described, okay? And it says if you watch from the equator, you are going to see both of them on the horizon. That's what I showed you in the previous picture, okay? So that's how the picture should look like. And number of you may be familiar with the phenomenon of the precession of the Earth's axis, which is the Earth's axis pointing, it's at an angle, pointing in somewhere in the sky, but it's not steady, It makes a very slow motion and goes like this and completes one cycle in 26,000 years. That is that Meru Mandara motion, you can say. Meru is like that axis, and Meru Mandara we say, and we think sometimes it's two. Well, in a way, yes, in a way, no. But that's the axis, and it's Manda motion of the axis. Meru Mandara, Manda. It's a Manda motion of the Meru. Okay, you can think of it like that. That's 26,000 year motion. So that's what Surya Siddhanta is also saying. Now, today, if you look at it, Polaris is the bright star in the northern hemisphere, but in southern hemisphere, there is no bright star. So it's not describing, Surya Siddhanta is not describing today's condition or even a condition 2000 years ago. Okay. So if we go through the scientific method, I'll skip this. We looked at, this is joint work of Mrs. Bhatti and myself. We looked at multiple references right from the 12th chapter. Now, they didn't have to be from 12th chapters. It just so happened they are from the 12th chapter of Surya Siddhanta. And what it took us is this. Okay. So currently, what I'm circling there is our pole star in the north, Polaris. There is no distinct pole star in the south. But if you go back, say, if you go back 3000 BC, like 5000 years ago, there are distinct pole stars in the northern and southern hemisphere. So could these be the two whole pole stars that Surya Siddhanta is referring to? Well, it could be, but we will see why it is not referring to these two. Okay. But if you go back to 14,000 years, like 12,000 BC, you see the brightest star of that region, respective region, becoming the pole star. In the north, we have Brahmarashi, Abhijit, Vega. In the south, we have Agastya or Canopus. Okay, I'm going to go a bit fast. So this is the 23.4 degree inclination now. Surya Siddhanta talks about 24 degrees, and it talks about 24 degrees in two places. And I'm taking time because it has to do with antiquity. Do you know when the Western Europe came in contact with India in India's civilization and started studying our documents? Too bad we don't study as much as they study. Okay, when they took it, they had this assumption that this is relatively, these are pagans, right? This is a new civilization, or don't know much, no accurate, no nothing precise. So when they found it's 24, and when they knew that the current is 23.4, and they assumed Surya Siddhanta is only 1500 years old. Now that is their fault. But see what a blunder they created. Therefore, if you read the Surya Siddhanta commentary of Burgess, you will find Burgess and Whitney. Whitney is the real culprit, not Burgess. Okay, Whitney just saying all kinds of bad things about Indian astronomy. Okay, he's saying these people don't know even how to measure accurately. Something that they should have measured 23.5, like 1500 years ago, they are measuring it as 24. What the poor Whitney, it did not occur to him that this could be very old ancient text, and the 24 degree is referred to some other time and not 1500 years ago. In fact, that's what we exactly find. I'm going to go fast through this. We pulled another verse from Surya Siddhanta, and it talks about the sun being closest to the earth during the Grishma and farthest from the earth during Hemanta. Now remember, this is exactly opposite of what we have today. So if you remember this cycle of 26,000 years, just as a quick back of the envelope calculation, it tells you have to go exactly opposite of that, which is half of 26,000, approximately 13,000, 14,000 years ago. I'll go fast. When you combine all of this, so two pole stars, bright pole stars, Agastya in the south, Vega or Abhijit or Brahmarashi in the north, and the point of Hemanta Rutu, at that time, the sun farthest from the earth, and the point of Grishma Rutu, the middle of Grishma Rutu, closest to the sun, that comes to 12,000 BC. That is, you can call the epoch of Agastya. It's the epoch of Ramayana, it's the epoch of Brahmarashi, but epoch of Agastya. Okay, it's immediately that gives us 14,000 years of Indian civilization. And keep in mind, the civilization did not begin on that day. I'm going to go a bit fast through this. There are many. This is not the only update in Surya Siddhanta. There are many updates. Actually, I have listed how many, like 6 updates here. Part of this work is wonderful work of Dr. Anil Narayanan. He's a former ISRO scientist, now based in Washington, DC. It's a peer-reviewed journal. Work is available. Amazing work. Okay. So there are multiple, and these are the only updates that we have found. Surya Siddhanta is a lot older. And I'm going to give you one reference of that in the context of Agastya. Let's look at the southward journey of Agastya, because that is the story most of us are familiar with. Okay, most of us are familiar with that Agastya left from the south. He came to Vindhya Parvat. Vindhya Parvat did Namaskar, and Agastya said, just stay bent like this and don't get up until I come down. Okay. Now what you find is the Vindhya word comes, Agastya word comes, all of this comes, but just the story that I told you, you will find it difficult. And if you did find, do let me know where you found it. But you will find this story. I mean, I did not find this story anywhere in Ramayana, Mahabharata, and any Puranas. The very specific story of Agastya crossing the Vindhya, Vindhya bending, and Agastya saying, don't do this. And that time, the star that Agastya saw in the south, and that's how it was named as Agastya. That's how Canopus was named as Agastya. Okay. And Professor K.D. Abhyankar, he has connected this with, say, 3000 BC or 4000 BC or 5000 BC. There is no ground for this. I mean, Mrs. Rupa Bhattiji has shown why that is falsified. But I want to move on because this is the story that everyone has in their mind. There is another way to look at this. Again, these are Bhattiji's slides here. Okay, right now, I mean, if you look at this, if you go backwards through the full cycle, 26,000 years, okay, that's when Agastya could be seen as far up as a Kurukshetra, that latitude. But as the time passed, like as it came to, now we are coming towards us, 19,000, it could be only seen from the Vindhya. Okay, so that's possibly that Vindhya thing. See, remember, the civilization is existing. Those of us who are stuck in a Indian civilization for only last 8,000 years or 10,000 years, they will simply not even comprehend what I'm saying. Okay. And I understand why they will not comprehend, but that's what this is being referred to. Okay. As the time passed, a time came when the Agastya could only be seen from Chidambaram. Okay. And further south, but not any further north. And every time that is happening, see, that is happening in celestial, but that has to be realized a terrestrial, just like we have a Kashi, we have a Ujjain, you know, Mahakal in Ujjain, Kala, Samaya, it's for a reason. Okay, we have Somnath in a certain place, we have a Chidambaram in certain place, we have Madurai in certain place. It is for a reason. Okay, now we will not have time to go through that, but my point is a celestial phenomenon is hard coded on the ground. Okay, and the Kala, that is the Shiva, and you see those many Shiva temples, and for space Vishnu temples. Okay, now this is again, if you go down, this is the time of again Ramayana. Okay, so it's not true that the Agastya could not be seen from all of India. There was small portion of India that Ramayana could be the Agastya could be seen. Something else that I don't have a time to discuss, but here is this. When you go back to that time, actually the ocean's level were much lower, which means there was a much more landmass further south, and you could go further south and therefore also see Agastya. Okay, but a good view was from the top of the mountain, obviously. Okay, the Mahindra mountain. Quickly, celestial to terrestrial. Okay, how will you take this imprinting of what is happening in the celestial and bringing it to terrestrial, and how does that help with understanding the antiquity of Indian civilization? Okay, for example, the zero longitude. Now, I don't know if many people know this. Right now, if I ask someone where is the zero longitude, they will say Greenwich, you know, the Royal Observatory in London. But that only happened 150, less than 200 years ago. They moved it from the Ujjain, like the Indian zero longitude, to to England. Okay, because whoever controls powers, they can decide, they can control the time. But if you look at the Laghu Bhaskariya, for example, the zero longitude is given passing through Suralaya, Sthaneshwar, Avanti, Vatsyapura, and Lanka. I'll not go into the detail, but my point is these locations, so think of it, Lanka, Vatsyapura, Avanti, Sthaneshwar. Some of these places are not identifiable anymore, like a Lanka or a Suralaya, okay? But you can actually see these places here. So Sthaneshwar, if you go to Kurukshetra, Thanesar now they call it, the whole temple of a Sthanu Bhagwan, Sthaneshwar, Shiva Mandir. I mean, we have been there. Okay, it is there for a reason, to take that celestial phenomena, encode it. It's a limit of something. Kurukshetra is the northern limit from which Agastya can be seen at any point, so to say. Okay, beyond that, Agastya would not be seen at any time through this 26,000 year cycle. Ujjain, again, why this place has such importance, Mahakala? Because it's a astronomy, very critical for astronomy. Okay, if you, those of you who have been to Somnath, you might have seen this Banastamba. The significance of that is this is the first point on the land in the north. If you start from the South Pole at the longitude of Somnath, okay, I mean, other lands different, but if you just draw a line, there is nothing in, no land in between, so to say. Starting from a South Pole all the way to that Banastamba in Somnath, there is no land in between. It's all water from the South Pole. Okay, that's how this significance was made. That's how these were encoded. If you go down to Badami, Karnataka, you see the Agastya Tirtha Lake, Badami, the place Vatapi near. Again, the connection of where the Agastya was visible at different epochs of time. Okay, quickly, I showed you from Ramayana, I showed you from Rigveda. I showed you from Surya Siddhanta. Let me show you from Upanishad, and then I'll stop. What you are seeing here on the screen. So now I'm bringing the celestial and terrestrial together. Okay. What you have is on the y-axis is the sea level. Okay. Today's sea level is where you see this 0. Okay. That is where the today's mean sea level is. Okay. Now understand, this is a composite graph. Okay. So it looks very smooth. It's not that smooth. On the x-axis, you have the time. And so time is where we are today here at 0. And now we are going backwards in antiquity. So 20,000 years ago, 40,000 years ago, 60,000 years ago, and so on. And this is how the water levels worked. Okay, so let's not go back too far, but let's get back to interesting to here. This is again from one of the paper work of Rupa Bhattiji. Very interesting. And then I'll add my 2 cents on it. So the specific timing she's talking about, it is referring to a specific portion that comes into Maitrayani Upanishad. So let me give that reference first. Okay, the Maitrayani Upanishad. It is in the first Prapatak, okay, and the last verse of that. Quickly, the translation might help. Okay, so what this is describing. Okay, now do you see the Agastya there? Again, just like Agastya coming to the south, many would be aware of Agastya drinking the ocean, the Anjali Mudra, and drinking the ocean. Okay, how do we connect that? Now, people will connect in 10 different ways, and that's perfectly fine. Here, I'm mentioning my particular context here. Okay, so what Bhattiji has done there is she was referring to a very specific narration of one of the king of Ikshvaku dynasty. This is long before Rama, long before Bhagwan Ram, after Ikshvaku. And what this king is describing is that he's saying, a lot of things are happening. The falling of the mountains, drying of the great oceans, falling of the mountains, the moving of a pole star, the cutting of the wind ropes that holds the stars. The longitudes are changing, okay? The latitudes are changing. A lot of things are happening there, okay? And so you can read that, actually, Maitrayani Upanishad. But some of the points we can pull is moving of a pole star, longitudinal change in the position of the stars, okay, and the drying of ocean. Now, if you try to take this ancient Indian narration, and try to connect with both the celestial and also the terrestrial, this is what you find. And based on that, she actually connected this to around 34,000 BC. Now, to that can be a shock to many. People may fall off their chairs. To appreciate that, you have to study other works. Like you have to study my books, you have to study whatever else she has written. You have to look at many other works, okay, to get to this point. But I'll quickly mention this. So she has referred to that particular event around like 34,000 BC or so. But I want to take you guys slightly before that to say 38,000 time frame, okay? 38, 39 year, 38,000 will do, 36, 37,000 will also do. Do you know what is happening? So 13,000, 12,000 BC is when we said Agastya was a pole star. When would be the Agastya pole star previous to that, previous to 12,000 BC? Just approximately, you have to add 26,000 years again, 13,000, so 12,000 BC plus 26,000. So 36,000 and 38,000. That is the time I want to take you. So now imagine from India, Agastya has almost disappeared for most part of India because it has become a pole star. I'm talking of 37,000, 38,000 years, 30,000 BC, 38,000 BC. But something interesting is happening here, as you can see on the celestial. Suddenly the ocean levels, we're not going to the causes of it, but the ocean levels are drastically going down. This is that drying of the oceans. Look at the drop, okay, from like a minus 80, so 80 meters down to further down to literally 140. Okay, so that is what 60 meters down the ocean went in a very short time. I mean, these are thousands of years, but in Earth history, it's a very short time. And civilization is noticing it. Okay, and just imagine that now, because the water is going down, and now actually the more land is available, plus the very fact the land is, the water level is going down, you can see much farther on the horizon, and you can see Agastya. Okay, that is like, imagine as Agastya drinking the ocean. Okay, so that's going back to that time, so 38,000 BC. But something interesting, and I'm not going to dwell on this, and I'm almost done. Now, if you look at the latitude of Agastya when it was a pole star in 12,000 BC, it gives a number. I'm not going to the details to keep it simple. It gives a number, okay? I mean, we can calculate what was the latitude, how far south Agastya has gone in 12,000 BC. That is not the number given in Surya Siddhanta. Surya Siddhanta gives a different number for Agastya, okay? And if you go back, the number that is given by Surya Siddhanta for Agastya latitude, if you want to ever see when that was possible, from starting from our time, this very time today, 2020, if we have to go back, and now again, this is also a discovery of Mrs. Rupa Bhattiji. If we have to go back in time, the first time, now going backwards in antiquity, where the latitude reached by Agastya, star Canopus, that matches with what is given in Surya Siddhanta, is also the 38,000 BC that I just referred to. Okay, so that's how Agastya is helping us actually go beyond this one simple cycle of the precession of the equinoxes and trace our ancient history beyond 24,000 years. Therefore, I showed you two graphs. One is the 24,000, and other researchers, you might have heard the name Professor P.N. Oak, a great researcher. Many people who don't understand scientific acumen they are quick to give him a bad name. Now, many things that he did, they came out wrong, but that's not a surprise. I mean, future generations will look at our research and may say, well, what were they thinking? But remember, we are doing the research in the context that is available to us, the science and technology that is available to us, and that's what Dr. P.N. Oak was doing, or that's what Dr. Vedavyasa was doing, or that is what Kota Venkatachalamji was doing, and Lokmanya Tilak and S.B. Dikshit, and so on. Okay, so we have to appreciate these wonderful individuals. We have to go into their shoes and their times to see what they had done. The reason I mentioned the P.N.O. is for this. Somewhere in his book he has written, okay, and when I read that, this is a few years ago, but somebody reminded me of that, it fascinated me. And he said, for some reason, it appears that the civilizational memory for any civilization doesn't seem to go beyond 24,000 years. And, my theory my explanation for that reality, assuming that is true, is that maybe because it's the precession of equinoxes. Because once the precession of equinoxes, one cycle is complete, then we need some additional different evidence beyond precession of equinoxes that will tell us we are allowed to go beyond one cycle of 26,000 years. We are so lucky that through Agastya, we have evidence like just what I described, the latitude of Agastya given in Surya Siddhanta. It has already allowed us to break the barrier of this last 24,000 years or 26,000 years cycle and allow us to go beyond. And I can assure you that Agastya is going to help us to go further. Quickly, I want to bust another myth that always stays in the context of Indian antiquity. Many people think that when there was an ice age, and people hear of ice age, the India was also covered with ice, and every Indian was also shivering, and doing nothing or did not even exist. That's absolute nonsense. Okay, that is because people don't bother to study. What I'm showing you here is from the LGM, the last glacial maximum. So you can think of like that 35,000 BC, we talked to 20,000 BC. That was when the ocean levels were down. What you are seeing in the dark is where the ice coverage was. So if you look at the northern North America, significant, whole of Canada and portions of United States, they were all glaciers. Same thing with the Europe. And I'll not go into the reasoning for it, but there is a wonderful, just logical reasoning why this particular area was covered with ice. Okay, no time for today. But that's why you see the England was simply not there. Norway and all the northern part of Western Europe was all under this. But look at the other areas. Okay, that was ice free. It's very important that we realize that. And quickly, just to show you what was happening in India, a great civilization was thriving in India, a different kind of civilization than what we are used to. Okay, the regular monsoon that we are used to was not necessarily set up, stabilized in all parts of India. But just to quickly close it and leave some time for question answer, look at this area. This is our India here. If you go back again, I'm talking 20,000 to even all the way to say 10,000 BC. What you will find is that much more land was available in India. The Sri Lanka was connected to India. Okay, the Gujarat did not look like this with the water coming in. In fact, that was all land. You could easily just go straight, walk towards, all the way to Balochistan and whatnot. But this area, that middle area, and if you see what kind of area was that in terms of the weather, if you come here, it was a tropical grassland. If you look at this dark brown chocolate kind of color area, that is again part of India, that was tropical woodland. And yes, there was desert, like there is a desert in Sahara and whatnot. And you can see that desert going back. And therefore, you're not a surprise. You see these references to desert in Rigveda. You also see the references to desert in Ramayana. You also see the references to desert in Mahabharata, but actually less in Mahabharata. And again, I don't have a time to go there why it is less in Mahabharata in comparison to Ramayana, but there is again very good explanation. The key point I want to say is that Indian civilization is very old. Don't get confused with the ice age and how can there be a civilization. Okay, this is a good example of that. And if you go further backwards beyond this 40,000-50,000 years, then there was actually a warm period. Okay, I mean, there were warm periods in India. There may be colder periods in other parts of the world. Quickly, the Ramayana times. See, this is the temperature, change in temperature in Greenland cores. Okay, and that can have we can extrapolate that for rest of the world. I just want to show you the temperature lower. The y-axis is the temperature, lower temperature. But it just so happened, just like getting ready, I said, for the arrival of Bhagwan Ram, just like we have to get ready for the arrival of Bhagwan Ram's mandir. Getting ready, that there was a temperature peak, as if like it warmed up, the earth warmed up. And we have to think of India, but this is happening in the Greenland. That is called this bowling event. This is the timing, the 12,240 to 12,196. Right there, actually, there was a very beautiful weather, and you see the long winter still. Okay, but that is not just for ice age reason. That is also for the astronomy reasons that I showed you. Okay, the Earth was away from the sun when it was a winter. Okay, during that time. So two reasons, like long winters in the northern hemisphere, and you see the beautiful descriptions of those in Ramayana. My quick point is, the many of the astronomical, terrestrial, hydrological, river descriptions, geographical descriptions, agriculture descriptions, all that you see in Ramayana, for example, I'm especially talking Ramayana, they get reflected into our modern research. Now these people that I shared the research, they have nothing to do with Ramayana, nothing to do with Mahabharata, nothing to do with Rigveda. They're not even aware of this, or if they're aware, that is not their aim. Okay, but it perfectly matches with what we have done. Raghavanji introduced my books, so I don't want to spend time on this. And he said these books are available on Amazon. That's correct if you're outside India. If you are inside India, right there in where the your center is, Rishivatika, or close to it, in Bangalore. But you don't. This is done virtually, so don't look for office. If you are in India, you can get these books, because ordering from America cost a lot, because they have to be shipped, printed, and shipped from here. So if you are in India, go to there is a site there, subupublications.com. Okay, and a number also, but you can order the online all those books. Okay. And right now there is a combo package, the COVID combo package, 900 rupees or something, all three books together. So take advantage of it if you are interested. And what I just showed you, this is my last slide. What I just showed you, for 24,000 years of what is already been established, but something that we are exploring going back to 100,000 years and possibly 200,000 years. I want to create a framework, okay, a template. And that is my next project that I'm working on, the history of Hindu civilization. Now, not all the blanks will be filled. In fact, I want to create a template when other researchers, future researchers, hopefully should able to come and quickly able to connect with what is already known to what they find that is unknown until then. All right. So with that, I want to stop. I will stop sharing my screen. I have lots of blogs, like 500 plus blog articles here, okay, that people can read. That is something that's not been published yet in a book form, but a lot of useful information. This is the link to the books in India. If anyone wants the PowerPoint presentation, what I will do is I will send it to Gadadhar Avare ji, and he can distribute that. Okay, so I can send the presentation to him. That's my, if you want to contribute, that's on the Patreon there. And I also have a research discussion group page on a Facebook, and that's my Twitter handle. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing, and if we have time, we will go through question answer. Raghavanji, back to you.
Yes, thank you very much, Nilesh ji. It has been, I mean, the time just passed, and I feel this is not sufficient at all. Thanks for the wonderful talk and covering the topics right from Vedas, Puranas, Itihasa, and then epics, as well as the complete literature, Vedic literature. So we have few questions. We will take this up in the next few minutes. I would also request other viewers, if you have any questions, please post it in the chat window so that we can take it up. So first question is from Yadagiri Putta. So though the question, I think you have answered it, but again, I'm reading it for the clarification part. So Ramayana happened in Treta Yuga and Mahabharata at the end of Dwapara Yuga. So itself, the question is referring to the different definitions of the yugas which you have mentioned in the talk. So he is referring to 8.4 lakh years.
Correct.
And the difference as per the presentation seems to be 7,000 years. Can we get some clarification? Sorry for my ignorance.
No. Okay, it's a great question. I mean, I forgot the name, but it's a great question. It is also a frequently asked question. Okay. So one thing to the viewers, I would encourage them, and I'm going to answer this question, but I'm going to encourage also them to go to my blog site, nileshok.wordpress.com. And if they search with FAQ, like a frequently asked question, and I have answered like there, and if some new interesting question comes, I add the question, I add the answer, so that we use time for different things. Quickly, this whole idea of Kali Yuga to be equal to 432,000 years, Dwapar 864,000 years, and then Treta the 3 times that, and then the Kruta Yuga to be 4 times the Kali Yuga time, 4:3:2:1 ratio.
Right.
4:3:2:1 ratio is correct. That comes from playing the game of a dyuta. Like, when you do this thing, one, if the number one comes, that's called Kali. And then, then you say number two, Dwapar, Dwa, Dvi, the Treta and Chaturtha, Cuatro, in Spanish, Cuatro, for example. Raghavanji, you would be hearing that in
Right.
California. Okay. So Chaturtha. So that's where it comes. Where is the origin of this number? Quickly, to answer that question, this number has a astronomy significance, but then it was somewhat misunderstandably used for the timekeeping in a different way. It was meant for timekeeping, but what was it? 4.32 million years. If you take that such a broad number, which is the 4.32 million years, those many rotations of the sun around the earth. This is an imaginary number. What it does, it allows one to state the rotational period for all the planets, all the visible planets, including the nodes as Rahu and Ketu, in such a way that there is no error in defining their orbital period. So if you know LCM, the lowest common denominator and those kind of things, it is something like this. And so it was meant for that. You can see this number, what I'm just telling you. Don't have to take, the one who is listening, don't have to take my word for it. You can go to Surya Siddhanta and see this, what I'm just saying. You can go to Arya Bhattiya and can see this. But somewhere we took that as a meant for the something to define the accurate period. We misunderstood to mean it for measuring the time of certain yuga, because this was called yuga. This was called Mahayuga. And yuga, as I said, has multiple definitions, including your mental state. If you are sleeping, that's like you are in a Kali Yuga. If you wake up and sit down, you are in a Dwapar. If you get up, you are in a Treta. And if you start walking, then you are in a Satya Yuga. That is the definition of Aitreya Brahmana. And Mahabharata says Raja Kalasya Karanam. Okay, so we should not take that one definition. Actually, in my conviction, a misunderstood definition of that 432,000, and try to connect why there are only 7,000 years between Ramayana and Mahabharata. In fact, so that's my short answer, so that we can get to other questions. But I would encourage you to go to my blog site, search with a FAQ, and I have given slightly longer answer there. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, sir. There is a next question from Sri Krishna. One of the blog of Rupaji talked about Vedas remembering Ice Age in India. Does Agastya go back to similar times? Also, I felt Sagara and burning of his sons, the Sagara king, and burning of his sons referred to Mount Toba explosion. Your opinion, please.
Okay. So there are two questions there. So the first one is Mrs. Bhattiji referring to Ice Age in India.
Ice Age.
Yeah. What she is referring to is that when there was this growing ice age in the northern part of, say, Europe and whatnot, or even around the world, I mean, that's okay. The temperatures were definitely lower than what they are today, everywhere, including India. Okay. It would be actually pleasant, for many parts of India, right? What was happening was there were not many forests like there are forests today. And therefore, there was that hunter-gathering that people refer to in the Western history speaking. It existed in India, but it wasn't 10,000 years ago. I mean, of course, hunting gathering even exists now. That's a different story. So there was this time period where there were different species of even lions that you see mentioned in Rigveda and whatnot. So that is the time period she's referring to. And yes, to answer quickly, Agastya's time does go back to that. See, Agastya is also Agastya the hunter. I didn't have a chance to talk about it. But Agastya, as an expert, Agastya was an expert for everything. Agastya taught many people many things. And one of them is also hunting. Okay. And so, yes, so what she's referring to, and Agastya's time does go back to that time. Agastya as a pole star, of course, always was there, or as a star. But Agastya as an individual or the sages were also there. The second question was the Sagara and the fire. Could that be Toba explosion? It could be. See, what we need to do is just because we read something, we cannot jump and say that's what it was and done. We need to do research. Just to give you an example, that one verse, those of you who are familiar with my research work, that one verse from Mahabharata took me 15 years, nothing else, only that one verse. Okay. So if you want to figure out this Sagara thing, we have to go back and figure out if we have to connect, Until we have evidence, we shouldn't go and claim it. But it's okay to conjecture. Could it be? And we should do more research.
Thank you very much, sir. And there is one question from Rupam Sharma ji. Why you took the reference of 1 lakh years to start with? I think you have answered it again in the times of the Yuga as a basis start for the Kali Yuga.
Oh, okay, but 1 lakh year, 100,000 years, I'll give a quick answer. There is a very specific reason why I took 100,000. Because based on the available evidence, available geographical, hydrology, potomology evidence, we have evidence for river Saraswati, Mahasaraswati. Okay, Mahasaraswati, which is the Saraswati described in the oldest mandalas of Rigveda, Naditame, Ambitame, Devitame, Saraswati, Giribhya, Samudra, and all that. That Saraswati, the evidence tells us, definitely began 100,000 years ago. And we have a geological evidence of that. So I said, at least let me go there.
So based on the facts available.
Based on the facts available, yes.
Yeah, thank you, sir. And there is a question from Durga Prasad ji. There is a controversy about the length of Kali Yuga. I think that was as Deva Yugas and present day Panchanga Pandits. I think you have explained, and FAQ is also there. So I'm skipping that question for now. So there is a second question from the same person. Nilesh ji, can you please talk more about birth of Agastya? How far have you been able to trace back in antiquity?
Well, it goes to 7th mandala. I will give a very safe political answer. Okay. And first we have to decide the dating of 7th mandala. We know it is more than 24,000 years, but that doesn't mean we know that it happened in 24,000. So when we find that, we will know it. Also, we have to understand, as we go back in the past, this is what you call something that is not known merges with the known. When we don't know, we say everything started with a Brahma. Okay, that is our simple answer to something that we don't know. So that we may end up with that. There is something magical that was happening. Mitra Varuni Vidya, Mitra Varuni as a electricity and all that. So, we don't know what it is. So that's one aspect. But the first one that he asked, and that you skipped, and you skipped for a right reason. What was that question again?
Yes.
I thought I will add something to it.
There is a controversy about the length of Kali Yuga as Deva Yugas and present day. The relationship between how the Panchangas are.
Right. Well, I wanted to add something. See, just like to define the accurate and precise orbital periods of visible planets, a big number of 4.32 million was used, okay, which got misunderstood in some different ways. That same thing has happened, the astronomy phenomenon, but that has happened to our Deva Yuga and Manavi Yuga and Pitru Yuga. So I want to just briefly take a minute to say that. For example, in the earth, we talk the North Pole and the South Pole. The North Pole was seen as a Deva Bhumi. That's why we saw the Suralaya, the top place there. And then the South was considered Asura. Sura, Asura. Okay. That literally did not mean this is a metaphor. The Samudra Manthan is also a metaphor, like exploring, like we are mining things and we are getting things. We are domesticating animals and we are benefiting from it. That is. But it is seen as a Suras and Asuras doing the Samudra Manthan. Sura on the one side, Asura on the other side. Okay. So now what happens is this. You will see that in Surya Siddhanta, Aryabhatiya also. It says here on the equator, where we are in India, we have this regular day and 1 month of the lunar month. If you go, he says, to the Devas, like to the North Pole, they have a day of 6 months and a night of 6 months. So Ahoratra, their Ahoratra, is like a 1 year for us. Same thing for Asuras, it happened. Right. Now, so now that Ahoratra turned into 1 day. Now, so Deva Laya, so now you multiply by 365. So it became a big number. Right. For a Pitrus, they were thought to be going to the moon. The Pitrus are going to the moon. And now the moon, if you see the day on the moon, it is equal to 15 days of Aho and 15 days of Ratra. That is a well-known. So now they come up with another. The Pitru year is 1 month is equal to this. And actually, I'm researching right now the Egyptian Egyptian history, because it's very well connected to Ramayana also. And you will see these exactly same confusion, by the way. Just like in Ramayana, we have a description of Rama ruling for 11,000 years. Now, our great sages have given the answer to that. Our recent sages, they have said, Ahoratra Samvatsara. When something doesn't make sense, you have to take 1 year as a day. So if you take 11,000 years divided by day as that, turn that into years, it comes to 30 years.
Right.
So Rama ruling for 30 years. The same problem is been faced by the descriptions given in Egyptian records. Actually, I'm researching that right now. There also they said this king ruled for 9,000 years. Okay, so somewhere because of the like maybe younger Dryas, where there was a lot of chaos on the earth, we might have lost connection to our ancient wisdom, and now we are trying to make sense out of it. So I wanted to give that answer also. Yeah.
Right. Thank you very much. I think you have given a detailed answer to that question, because most of our minds, I mean, the younger generation are trying to interpret this scientifically, and I hope you're covering this in one of the latest books which you presented in the presentation.
Yeah.
Right. Moving on to the next question, Shri Mahodaya. Just curious to know, like, your view on Shubhe Shobhane Muhurte Adhaya Brahmana and Dvitiya Parardhe. Okay. Adya Brahmana Dvitiya Parardhe. So it is about again this Yuga. Relevance to the time in our so what's your opinion and view about it is what is
okay. So not going into that specific translation, but it is when we will do it every day, like doing a sankalpa. We will say the whole, which yuga, manvantara and whatnot. See, that is perfectly fine for a certain purpose. Example, in everyday life, if I ask you, Raghavanji, and I'm not going to ask you that question, but if I ask you what year you were born, immediately the year that you're going to say, guess what? You're going to say that in a Gregorian year, right? Similarly, when we want to accomplish something, we need some reference point. For our existing Indian calendars, most of the Indian calendars, our reference point is 3102 BCE. Okay, it's an astronomical reference point. Somewhere we have to take it, but that is not to be confused with the beginning of a Kali Yuga. But that has happened, and that's fine. I mean, I'm not saying we should stop researching it. People should research. But if you start looking for the root of that 3102 or the connection and try to corroborate that with, say, what is said in Ramayana, what is said in Mahabharata, you will not able to make sense out of it. I'll take a quick digression and tell you something. In Mahabharata, this is a different definition which matches with Raja Kalasya Karanam. Now the definition is given in Mahabharata, but it also matches for Ramayana. So what is said is this: when Bhishmacharya was ruling with Chitravirya and Vichitravirya as young boys, okay, they were young. The Mahabharata description says that Bhishmacharya was administering his Kuru kingdom in such a beautiful fashion that he brought Satya Yuga. Now we are talking of Dwapar Yuga. He brought Satya Yuga. When Parshuram got rid of miscreants and those people who were impolite Kshatriyas, they were sent in all 4 different directions. Mahabharata says Parshurama brought Satya Yuga. And in Ramayana, you hear when Rama came back from Lanka and started ruling, his rule, Rama Rajya, we call it, Prajatantra, and it was such a beautifully, he was ruling the kingdom that he brought Satya Yuga. Now remember, Rama also we agree that is a Treta Yuga or Bhishmacharya in a Dwapar Yuga, but they all brought Satya Yuga, and that is the Raja Kalasya Karanam. So there are different definitions. It's perfectly okay to use a definition depending on the context. It is absolutely wrong to get stuck with one definition and trying to apply it for everything.
Right. Thank you for throwing some light around the definitions of things in the various context of it. There's another question, I think, to follow up on the same Sankalpa which you just clarified. So carbon dating of creation of this beautiful creation timing, according to radiocarbon dating, have you done any research, and do you have any timelines associated?
Okay. So see, for example, when I say I do research now for geology research, I don't go and actually start digging in Haryana or Rajasthan. I use the data used by others, right? Same thing for carbon dating. Now I have expertise in that area. For example, AMS, the spectroscopy and all that. Just is a coincidence. But even though I have expertise, even I do consulting in that area, I actually don't go and run the mass spectrometer and do anything. But I understand that's not the question. With carbon dating, actually with any dating technique, what you will find is that at some point it's going to get limited. Okay, so for example, like when you are doing this certain technique, carbon technique based on certain thing, another thermoluminescence on another thing, at some point it will reach its limit. So carbon dating, I forgot, but it can go up to 40,000, 50,000 years. It cannot go beyond that. It cannot be used beyond that. Okay, then you have to go for some other techniques. Thermoluminescence will take you further. There are many other techniques. They will have their limitations. We do have evidence that human beings who look just like us existed for a very long time. Now we are talking millions of years and multi-million years. Okay, even right now, I mean, even the scientific consensus is for 2-3 million years, like a human being just like us, like a hominid, like a Homo sapiens, Homo erectus, whatnot. So that's what we know. And if you look at the Neanderthals, actually people should know their brain was bigger than us, and the brain size is connected with the intellect and whatnot, at least on an average. So that's all we know. That's all we know. But at some point we will reach into limits. And let's not forget, in getting, I mean, my focus is on antiquity or defining the dating. But just the dating for the sake of dating is not my objective. Never. It was never my objective. What it allows you to do is it allows you to study our civilization, science, culture, technology, other developments, philosophical developments, tattvajnana, darshana, in the context of this. For example, based using my research, I could show that the Sushruta is definitely more than 8,000 years old. Whereas if you go to Wikipedia, it says 600 BC. And if you ask them the evidence, they don't have any evidence. I have the evidence.
Wonderful.
So it is to understand our civilization. That is the objective for deciding the dating.
Sure. A couple of quick questions and then we'll conclude. I know the time is already, we have passed by the time. So would you say, Dr. P.N. Oak, that I think probably it was your question only, sorry, not P.N. Oak, that the species which Western science says that were wiped out approximately 20 to 40,000 years ago coexisted with the Ikshwaku ancestors of Sri Rama. So what's your reference? Or
okay, so no, I understand the question. The timing is actually wrong. The significant destruction of multiple animal species or even human species, you can say, got destroyed. That timing is the timing of Younger Dryas, which is you can say 11,000 BC as a median number, 11,000 BC to 10,000, 9,500 BC, Younger Dryas. Lot of destruction, lot of things happen on the world. So that would mean, if I'm saying Ramayana in 12,000 BC, that they coexisted. Okay, that's the conclusion based on our modern research, right? Modern research and my date of Ramayana, let's say. Now, I would encourage that individual, but everyone who is listening, to go back to Valmiki Ramayana and start reading. You will find these descriptions, like Kabanda, like Rama killing Kabanda and asking to, be buried in a different fashion. Some of the species, some creatures that are described, like a human, they can talk, they can communicate, but it almost feels like maybe it's not a human being, they are human beings. It depends on how we look at it. I mean, if you look at the Western Europe, until very recently, they did not look at folks outside Europe as human beings, or human beings, but of a much lower quality, right? Savages. So that can happen actually. So yes, people did exist, but it was a mixed thing. So for example, people ask me if Hanuman is a Neanderthal. Well, I don't know. He could be, but don't forget that Hanuman was a multilinguist and an expert grammarian. As long as you have to take the package. You cannot just say he was a Neanderthal and then just say it just was a monkey with a tail. No, the tail was the part of their uniform, so to say, and there is enough evidence in Valmiki Ramayana for that.
Right. Thank you. And the questions are kind of zooming in, but
no, we will take two more and stop. And yes, I'll give a short answer.
And we will conclude that. Yeah. So, how can we replicate the quality and meticulousness of your research? What does it take? For instance, study Sanskrit, the study Jyotish, then something. So they're trying to see how do we do research in short, and your guidance around it.
Right. Well, okay, so that could be a long answer, but the short answer is you do it for the rapture of living, meaning for the experience of it. If you are doing this for a money, actually, this is the best way to lose money, all that money you may have. I mean, I'm using my personal savings to support myself. When that goes away, that's what I have to figure out something, right? I mean, I do some consulting, but the corona has stopped that consulting too. But anyways, so if you're doing it for a money, absolutely wrong way to do it. If you're doing it for a popularity, don't go it. There are many easy, better ways to become popular. Okay, so that's number one. Once you understand that, you have a passion for this, and you understand there is a tapasya ahead of you, huge tapasya ahead of you, with no guarantee of success. That is ingredient number 3. Okay, when I was working on that one verse for 15 years, until I figured it out, there was no guarantee of success. So you have to be a madman to continue to work on something with no guarantee of success. And then you have to start studying. I wouldn't say Sanskrit. Sanskrit will definitely help. But I would say you have to start studying darshanas, like the scientific acumen you have to build. You have to build the logical reasoning, therefore Nyaya Darshana. So all our short darshanas, modern science, some of the wonderful research that is being done, revolutionary research, like Einstein, Kepler, Newton, how did they do it? Bose, C.V. Raman, how they did it. Actually go and find out what they did. Then people understand it's not a plug and play. It's not like going to a store, buying an Apple phone, coming home, charging it, and start working on it. Okay. If you have those ingredients, actually the knowing Sanskrit is not an impediment. Or knowing, what was the other thing that he said? Or knowing Jyotisha is not an impediment. Yeah, I did not start with the Jyotisha. See, I found fascinated by one specific verse. That verse happened to be from a Jyotish Shastra, astronomy. Therefore, I studied astronomy. So I would say instead of studying something in advance and now let's make some revolution, I would say find the problem. See, there's Professor Wheeler of Princeton. He says find the toughest problem in any field. Find the toughest unsolved problem in any discipline of science. Go solve it. That is the secret.
So I would like to bring to your notice, two things. One, of course, from your own talks, that you started off with Bhagavad Gita and then landed into the Mahabharata as an epic, and next the research started from there. And second, Guruji's reference where he mentions about sciences, it's a synthesis of all sciences.
Yes.
So it is not one science alone, as you also just mentioned.
Yes.
Right. Thank you. And the last question of the day, where we will also try and answer them offline. Quantum mechanics says about particle and waveform, which can be used for appearing anywhere and everywhere. Have you felt Agastya any time during your research? You also mentioned about some of the references that he appeared on the terrestrial, right? So do you have any references from your research?
Okay, so like during the Rama Ravan Yuddha, in fact, we have a reference that Agastya comes and, Rama is feeling a bit low on the energy, and Agastya Rudayam Stotra, the Aditya Rudayam Stotra, and, that is there, right? Do I have an experience of that? No, I personally don't have a direct experience of that, right? And what I would suggest in general is that these kind of Adhyatmic experiences, and again, you guys are with more experience than me. Sometimes what happens, if the audience is not in the same wavelength with you, they will not understand what you are saying.
Right.
Okay, so I will give a quick material example and we can stop on that, which is this. I cannot tell you to this day, when I read that Arundhati Vasishtha reference in 1995, I read many references on that chapter, second and third chapter. I cannot tell you why it held my attention. And I cannot tell you to this day what was it that made me continue to chase that reference for 15 years. In fact, I used to, even in some of the job interviews, when I have ran out of everything, I have discussed this, and the person will say, what else you do? What else you do? And I said, I ran out of everything. One time at the airport, Toronto airport, my interview was being done, and 3 hours we are sitting there because the other guy has not come, next person. So he says, I said, I ran out of everything. So I said, okay, now he's asking, Canadian guy. I said, I'm going to give it to him. So that time, this is 1997. On the Toronto airport, I told him, I'm also researching on something known as Arundhati Vasishtha. So I'm saying that kind of thing is it's inexplicable. The second one, I'll quickly tell you. I did an interview yesterday. I'll make it short. I was looking for the origin of weekday names, where it comes from. The answer is simple. It only place in around the world that knows why the weekday names are what they are, and why the sequence is the way it is, because it is given in India. That only place is India. It is given in Surya Siddhanta and Aryabhatiya. But to explain that to someone, there is a Swarthanuman, meaning I am convinced. But there is something called Pararthanuman. Now I have to convince others. And to convince others, I needed one reference. So this is my spiritual experience I'm sharing. Not Agastya exactly, but Agastya's blessings has to be there. One reference I was looking for, where I wanted in an Indian literature a day divided into 24 instead of 30, because muhurtas are 30, and I was not finding it. One day, right where I'm sitting right now, this is a few years ago, before 2014, I was sitting here, and I don't know, I was thinking, meditating how to solve that, where will I find it? And as if a message came to me. Now, message meaning somebody spoke in my ear, I don't know, but it's kind of an intuition, it came. But the message was very clear. It says, go upstairs where my puja room is, open Srimad Bhagavad Puran, and either in Skanda 3 or Skanda 5, you will find the answer.
Wow.
I went there in less than 30 minutes. I had found the answer. I came down in next 1 hour. I completed that appendix, which is in the historic Rama book. So now, is this a coincidence? Those people who think coincidence, perfectly fine. Even I'm okay with that as a coincidence. But it is my experience. That just, I will not able to prove it to anyone. I don't have a objectively testable evidence to prove that.
Oh, this is a wonderful experience. I think these kind of live experience is what, gives us a confidence about.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you. So with this, we will conclude the session,
Yes.
sir. From the bottom of my heart and from IIBS Rishivatika, we thank you very much for your time and for this enchanting talk with celestial and terrestrial facts about Maharshi Agastya, with references from Vedas, epics. And it's also enlightening to learn the antiquity of Indian civilization, which is, at least as it stands, 24,000 years old, based on the current evidences and facts. So we would also like to thank all the viewers who have joined us live on Rishivatika YouTube channel, and request all to subscribe to the channel for the latest notifications of the future talks. Stay tuned. Hari Om Tat Sat.
Hari Om.